That time an American was reincarnated into another world by SP Forda. Chapter 281. Welcome to Iron Legion. March 1st, 628. Everyone listen up. Faye perked up, but remained standing in place. A summoner, dressed in armor just like every other soldier on the base, intelligence agent or not, inspected her armor and brought out a tablet. Its screen flashed when its scanner washed over her, throwing out codes and alarms on the screen. The summoner simply brushed them aside and moved her to a nearby wall to stand by. Unlike the others, she wouldn't need to get fitted for armor. She decided to focus on her instructor's words. She was a tall woman, a knight with exquisite features but an awfully mean face. A chief at Authority 10 and with another rank denoting her strategic capabilities, her very presence was oppressive, every word that came out of her mouth sounding like they were divinely ordained. Her name was Instructor Bria. Here at Iron Legion, we do things in a superior manner compared to those at other strongholds. Iron Legion does not boast excess numbers, our paramilitary standing at only 50,000 strong. However, our firepower is entire magnitudes greater than even the richest stronghold the kingdom can proclaim. This enables us to wage war against scourge forces multiple times larger than our own. However, such destructive efficiency is only possible with the knowledge to wield the weapons around you alongside every other soldier on the field of battle. Faye watched the Magisterium students all get scanned and personally curated measurements. Then, the armorers started bringing out standard issue sets of armor. The armor was complete, brand new, and in nearly every case, offered entirely superior protective abilities than each student's personal armor. Instructor Bria continued. All of you are currently getting fitted with standard issue armor curated for each type of magus. Knights are offered heavier protection to take advantage of their strength. Warlocks are offered lighter armors with strength augmentation and mana concentrating abilities. Summoners are offered the same light armor as warlocks, with the same strength augmentation, but with superior versatility for wielding personal weapons. All armors also come equipped with a few standard protections essential for maintaining health on the toxic battlefields. Full environmental isolation, temperature regulation, adaptive camouflage, and integrated tacnet systems. All of these will keep you alive and informed, because Iron Legion does not fight by spending lives. We fight with machine and fire. Faye felt her skin tingle as Instructor Bria smiled. To prove this fact, in the 3 years since Iron Legion became fully operational, we have slaughtered over 750,000 scourge. In exchange, only 500 of our soldiers have given the ultimate sacrifice to date. That means for every soldier that has died, over 1,500 scourge have died with him. So when we say that Iron Legion is the greatest fighting force this world has ever seen, we fucking mean it. Faye felt herself get emotional, Instructor Bria calming herself after getting a bit excited. Soon after, all the students were equipped with their armor. Although they weren't completely custom designed and fitted like Faye's was, they were still better in every way than what they had, even if not in value. They all offered a protection level of 3 authorities higher than the authority of the wearer. Combined with the quality of the armor, it was gear that most students wouldn't ever touch for another decade at minimum, even if they had the money for it further down the line. Yet not only were they receiving it for free, but they would keep it with them even after they left Iron Legion. According to Instructor Bria's words earlier, the Magisterium was footing half of the bill, the rest being covered by John Cooper personally. When everyone settled, Instructor Bria grabbed their attention once more. Even with superior protection than anything the kingdom will give you, none of you will be allowed anywhere near the battlefield until you can properly integrate with those around you. The bare minimum expected of you all is that you don't get in the way. We will do our best to not only facilitate your presence, but impart proper knowledge and training. In exchange, every one of you will be expected to absorb what we impart and act accordingly. The first step of your training will involve learning to follow directions and learning what it means to live on Iron Legion grounds. There will be places you cannot go, things you cannot do, and procedures you must follow. While all of you are offered a certain amount of leniency, and those who matter are aware of your presence and how to treat you, certain expectations will be maintained according to what will be demanded of you on or around the battlefield. And we start now? Everyone line up and file out. The commander built a training ground just for you all, and we're going to put it to thorough use. Faye jumped up and hurried into line, everyone still in their armor. Although it would just be the basics for now, she was eager to learn as much as she could. This place was owned by John, after all. She was curious about the details of what made it so amazing. Oh my God, I'm gonna stab someone if they give us another book. Faye heard her friend groan in frustration as an alarm rang through the dorms, in agreement as they both crawled out of their beds. There was little to no physical training. After an entire week, they had done nothing but learn and learn. For the first 5 days, it was all about rules, regulations, doctrine, procedures, and oddly enough, some philosophy. After that, it got more interesting, thankfully. They were required to learn about all the tools, weapons, vehicles, and equipment that would be around them. Faye quite enjoyed learning about the organization of troops and armor, like heavy metal, air ops, and combined arms. She was especially interested in all the different kinds of technology that riddled the equipment and vehicles. From high-density reactive armor to cluster bombs, from the M300 super heavy battle tank to the F-88 Sky Screamer, everything she learned about had concepts and ideas that she could never have conceived of before. Well, extremely few people had, which was why John was the one to benefit from it all. He was the first to bring these ideas to life, and more than that, the first to field it all against the scourge. Faye knew there was far more to it all. Her mother had talked about some of the impossible technology John had created and developed, technology that not even she could understand. Still, despite the novelty of being on Iron Legion territory wearing off, she was excited about what little she was being exposed to. Nobody else outside their circle was able to learn what she was. It felt exclusive. The two quickly got ready and left their rooms, heading down the building among all the other students and lining up in the plaza. Along the way, they glanced at the time and found that it was a few hours before sunrise. Instructor Bria was there to greet them in the dark of early morning, standing there quietly with a few other armored individuals. What caught Faye's eyes, though, was John, standing there with the instructor and puppet master. He was dressed curiously, wearing a dress shirt and pants, suspenders over his shoulders, and his tie clipped halfway, fluttering with the morning breeze. The pants were white, the shirt and tie were hot pink for some reason, and his arms bulged from within rolled-up sleeves. Faye, as well as every other student, perked up in attention. The fatigue of their interrupted sleep washed away, curious about what John was doing there after not appearing for a week, and why he was dressed as such. Though despite the odd color combination, Faye was enjoying the eye candy. Once they were all there and silent, John spoke instead of the instructor. "Good morning, everyone, and apologies for the display. I recently finished a nice date with the missus before acquiring an opportune piece of information. Instructor Bria has informed me of the adequate level of information retention you all have displayed. This is to say that you've learned enough to move on to some more practical learning exercises. During your time here, none of you will ever be put into the position to personally fight the scourge. But I intend to show you why, and through your experience you will understand the kind of war we wage against our enemies. A short time from now, there is going to be a moderate engagement with the scourge on the front lines, and you all are going to be there. It's short notice, and I've been warned by the commanding general that bringing students to the battle might place them in an unnecessary amount of danger. But since I'm personally going to be there, I'm betting your safety on my life. Now, our forces move in 2 hours, so we have little time to waste. Instructor Bria, if you may." The instructor stepped forward, John stepping back with the puppet master, who looked like he was suddenly expressing his own concern over the sudden change of plans. John just laughed as the instructor yelled, "You heard the man. All of you need to grab your personal gear, equip your armor, and return to the plaza. You have 10 minutes, so get moving." Faye started running with the rest of the students, she and her friend scrambling back to their room to grab their gear. Faye already made it a habit to always have her gear on her, the bracer and bracelet containing her armor and spear always on her arms. Because of that, she could instantly dress in her armor, saving her the time to gather everything else. She was the first person to return to the plaza, the only one out there with John, the instructor, and the puppet master. John turned to her as some vehicles parked themselves nearby for transport. He smiled at her, having fun. She nodded quickly, feeling the excitement for the upcoming battle. They'd finally get to see everything they'd been learning about in action. John laughed. "I'm glad. This next part is going to be exhilarating." Faye smiled brightly behind her helmet, other students gathering around her. They were subsequently filed onto the transports, being sped through the base and toward the airfield where helicopters were waiting. They jumped on a fleet of those before taking off and flying across the desert. After around an hour of flying, they made their approach to the front lines. Faye could see the lights around the base they were going to, as well as the explosions from artillery behind the walls. The base looked active, and Faye felt her heart beating faster, realizing that they really were entering a battlefield now. They landed soon, other helicopters armed to the teeth taking off around them. Faye saw halos of light around the ends of the spinning helicopter blades, sparkling with by unknown means as they rose into the air. Once they touched down, they were rushed into armored transports and driven to the edge of the base, where they went beyond the wire, artillery behind them releasing constant volleys. That's when Faye saw her HUD flash, her communicator being roped into a new TACnet along with every other student. She heard John's enthusiastic voice. "Greetings, ladies and gentlemen. Looks like contact was made sooner than we expected, so we're going to catch up. Be ready to disembark. We'll be pulling up to the secondary layer of the entrenchment where we can get a good view of the show." The vehicle shook as it charged across the desert, the sound of constant explosions echoing in the distance. Soon they got louder, Faye not realizing how close they were until the vehicle suddenly stopped, the hatch dropping and slamming onto the ground. "All trainees file out." Instructor Bria yelled over the comms, Faye running out with the other students around her. The sound of cannon fire slammed into her body. She looked to the side, seeing the dense lines of tanks and APCs. There had to be at least 500 super heavy tanks on top of several times more light tanks. Helicopters up above unleashed snapping bolts of hellfire from turrets and tubes across their bodies, aided by streaking artillery shells that exploded amidst the enemy lines with towering plumes of fire and shrapnel. The tanks around them fired with concussive power, the two barrels on each super heavy tank firing as fast as they reasonably could. Despite that, the lines of charging Scourge had advanced comfortably close, the turrets on the tanks firing without end. Faye could see beyond the line, the flashing explosions giving her glimpses of the sheer density of monsters charging toward them. At some point, some nearby teams of soldiers fired some smaller mortars, shells flying into the air before flashing with their magic, illuminating the battlefield. It revealed tens of thousands of monsters, not an inch of ground to be seen between them. John's voice chimed once more. "Welcome to the front lines, trainees. Today, we're facing down a force of roughly 70,000 Scourge. They've been getting rather rowdy recently, and this is just another attempt by them to break our lines. Unfortunately, they've made the fatal mistake of allowing us to plant our flag. Buckle up, trainees. Today is going to be a long day of carnage." Right as he finished, a plane did a low flyby, barely able to be seen by the illuminating flares in the sky above. It released hundreds of bombs, all of them releasing clusters that exploded amidst the dense Scourge hordes. The wall of fire was so large that it nearly turned night into day, Faye's eyes unable to be torn away. Suddenly, all the knowledge she had been fed over the last week seemed to fly out the window. She couldn't fathom attempting to aid this battle in any way. If she tried to go and fight herself, she'd either be killed by the stampeding monsters or the constant detonations of fire crystals among them. In this place, she really was nothing more than a child to be babysat. She hadn't the slightest idea what was going on despite seeing it personally. She had learned roughly how the different kinds of armor worked around each other, but there was so much going on that it seemed like total chaos. She couldn't hear anything but the explosions, couldn't see anything but the fire. Her senses were overwhelmed, the air starting to taste like smoke despite the environmental seal. Her HUD was identifying the many tens of thousands of threats in front of her, as well as the thousands of allies around her. It was throwing out status reports about the temperature flashes coming from the detonations, the density and toxicity of poisonous mana in the atmosphere, the estimations of the strength of combatants in the enemy army based on their number and the density of magical energies in the area. As she wondered what the hell she was supposed to do, she was startled by a large hand that landed on her armored shoulder. She jolted and turned, seeing John standing there smiling. His tie fluttered with the wind, cigar in his mouth, face illuminated by the constant flashes of fire. She wondered how he was breathing in the air despite her toxicity reports putting out dangerous numbers. She heard his voice just fine, even over the nearby explosions. Makes you feel alive, doesn't it? I bet nothing the puppet master ever trained you for could prepare you for this. Faye shook her head. She felt completely out of her depth here. It felt like none of her training, nothing she had ever done throughout her life, had any applicability here. And yet, the man standing before her had invented it all. It wasn't just the tech either. He had reinvented war. A light suddenly flashed, Faye turning her head to see the shields on the tanks in front of them deploy. Some in-place shields sprang to life as well. And that's when massive globs of poisonous matter came streaking down from the sky. It filled the air around them with red gas, obscuring vision but accomplishing nothing else. Every person on the battlefield was equipped with armor that protected them from all airborne contaminants. At the same time, Faye was beginning to understand why John had made her armor with waste disposal systems. If the battlefield were to be filled with poison, and the battle wouldn't end for the entire day, then she would have no opportunity to even take off her helmet. It wasn't sounding so disgusting now. All trainees gather. This field trip is educational. John called everyone over underneath a shield, the couple hundred students all clustering around. That's when Faye noticed something appear behind him. It was a large suit of armor. After John stepped into it, the armor closed around him, mechanical parts moving to clamp over his body and protect it with interlocked metal plates. There were all sorts of components around his body, none of which Faye knew the purpose of, but it looked menacing and it made him almost an entire foot taller. He towered over everyone nearby, a weapon appearing in his grip. All right, what you're seeing now looks like nothing but chaos. But I can assure you, every single tank, every single APC, and every single person is in their spots for a very good reason. All of these tanks are working together in a manner that ensures no group of Scourge can march past our kill zone without taking bulk casualties that break apart their clusters. But once they start getting closer, other weapons must be engaged. Fire must be focused on individuals, and that's what you have turrets for. Only if the Scourge manages to break past every line of fire do soldiers start engaging personally. John started marching across the back line, the students all following and watching around them. After getting over the shock of what was going on, they started observing and seeing past a field full of fire. They saw the layers, including what happened behind the cannons. They saw lanes of lights every so often that armored cars charged down, carrying supplies and troops. Faye remembered learning about those. One had to be careful moving around those lanes, especially when it was dark and you couldn't see a barreling hunk of metal very well. There are plenty of moving parts, more than just the tanks on the front. You have the artillery coming from 5 miles away. You have the helicopters providing sustained explosive fire in areas of high resistance. You have planes overhead providing both eyes in the sky as well as the occasional bombing run for taking out stubborn groups of enemies. You also have logistical support, everything from medical to ordnance delivery. And all of it hinges on communication. In any war, communication is almost always the most important factor determining victory or defeat. In normal kingdom battles, communication isn't as important because they aren't the ones with giant machines of war to coordinate. Technology begets new ways of conducting battles. And that's why Iron Legion has the most sophisticated communication infrastructure known to this world. Aerials being jammed by mere scouts are an issue of the past. They can't silence our words, they can't hide from our eyes up above, and they certainly can't worm their way around the might of high explosives. Faye smiled at his words, thinking back to her magisterium education. She had been taught plenty about the Scourge as a whole, and she knew that having your communication cut by a scout was a bad situation to be in. It meant that there was a group of enemies nearby, and that you had probably already been seen, not to mention the fact that you couldn't call for help. Now it looked to Faye like such a trivial issue. She wondered why the kingdom hadn't solved the problem yet. In just a few years John had done so, and in front of everything else he had done, it was a mere footnote. A problem to Iron Legion looked more like the battle in front of them, a 70,000-strong army raving for their slaughter. They were walked down the battlefield, John explaining all the different parts of the battle lines. All the while, the battle only picked up in pace. Cannons fired faster, every turret was engaged, and more helicopters and planes made their strafing runs. There was never a single dark moment on the battlefield. There was always a bomb going off, a plume of flame rising into the sky, a shell flashing with high explosives, and pulverizing all the Scourge within several dozen feet. At some point, though, Faye felt some massive auras erupt from the Scourge backline. John stopped talking, turning as two large figures crested a hill. Faye's eyes constricted when she recognized the silver armor of an unholy light King Blood. But then a cannon fired, the King Blood being launched into the air when the shell slammed into its chest, exploding. The other King Blood looked at where its friend had just been before it too received a shell to the chest, its body disappearing in the distance, sent straight to the Scourge backline where planes were dropping cluster bombs. Ha ha ha. John started cackling, Faye wanting to laugh with him, but struck dumb by how such menacing monsters were just handled. She didn't believe they were dead, but it was obvious that even on this battlefield ruled by machines, they weren't capable of simply doing as they pleased. That wasn't even mentioning the fact that Iron Legion had plenty of its own high-authority hitters that could meet King Bloods on equal ground, especially with enhanced weapons. John raised his arms. Welcome to Iron Legion, trainees. While you won't be fighting during this introductory trip of yours, hopefully by the end of it, we'll be able to find you a place to contribute. Now come on, let's find a spare turret that you guys can try out. They all continued walking, wholly unconcerned about those two King Bloods, shields and fire lighting the world around them. That time an American was reincarnated into another world by SP Forda. Chapter 282, New Limits. The battle raged for the full day, despite it having already started when Faye arrived with the Magisterium students. It continued until sunset, and the only reason it ended that early was because the Scourge retreated. Faye didn't think she'd ever witness such a sight. It was unheard of for the Scourge to run, and this army had tucked their tails and fled with over 10,000 of their own. The entire time, Iron Legion didn't budge an inch. The tanks were planted right where they had been since they started. After the main part of the battle was finished, John took them all and headed back to the forward base they had been close to. It was a fortress unto itself, but in the excitement of their arrival, Faye hadn't been able to appreciate its sight. She couldn't now, either. She was so exhausted that she could do nothing more than trudge back to the helicopters that brought them here, falling asleep on the flight back. It was funny to her. She only felt this tired when the puppet master gave them an especially grueling day in the training grounds, exhausting every last ounce of her vigor and then some. Today, she hadn't done anything more than watch and learn, yet the mental toll was incredible. She wasn't the only one, of course. Instructor Bria had to scream at them to wake them when the helicopters landed. Faye wasn't sure how the troops did it. Sure, they weren't marching on a field and facing the Scourge head-on, but they were immense. She had seen tanks get swarmed, just to be set ablaze by nearby friendly turrets. She had seen Royals charging en masse, evading tank fire just to be intercepted by heavily armored troops from Iron Legion. The Royals had been outclassed, killed amidst thousands of their lessers. The armor of Iron Legion preventing a single life from being lost. After some time, though, she remembered one outstanding detail. A majority of the forces in the field were actually summoners. With their smarts, fast reactions, and ability to track the unending chaos, they could control the battlefield. It seemed so simple. Give a bunch of intelligent summoners weapons and armor, and there'd be nobody to outclass them. But it seemed John's genius triumphed here once more. Everybody had thought about the idea at some point. None had ever been capable of giving it life. The Magisterium students felt like they had their eyes opened. That day was one they knew they'd never forget, an experience extremely few could ever boast. They had gotten a glimpse of what machine warfare looked like, and suddenly everything else seemed to be inferior. They couldn't imagine walking onto another battlefield, with nothing but the armor around their bodies to protect them from the endless hordes of the Scourge, and the knowledge that a double-digit percentage of them would die. They had seen a superior form of war, and they would hold all others to that standard, not yet knowing they would forever be let down. Over the next week of their time at Iron Legion, the Magisterium students were educated on more complex matters. With real experience to reference, not only were the students more attentive, but they began to make sense of the chaos in their memories. The formations, the roles, the rules, the angles, the armament, the layers. They learned that what they saw as chaos was actually the very thing that prevented chaos from taking hold. In this game of war, there were just more types of pieces on the board. It was a matter of specialty, they learned. No single vehicle could be good at everything. The more roles you tried to make something, or someone, fit into, the worse they would be at every one. But the more you specialized something, the better it would be at its role. That came with the weakness of being deficient in everything else. But if you could design other things or train other people to fit the rest of the roles, you'd have an extremely high-skill army. You would have fewer mistakes, fewer deaths, and most importantly, less chaos. So long as it was all properly supported, of course. That's why John boasted about his top-tier communications and logistical infrastructure. After their second week, they started doing drills with real equipment. They were thrown into tanks and taught how to drive and shoot it. They got to learn how to collect intelligence using magical sensors. They went and did target practice. They learned how to communicate properly in order to call in things like air support and artillery fire. All of it was basic education. None of them would really operate equipment on their own, and none of them were taught the full breadth of knowledge necessary to become a functioning cog in the war machine. They were students, and this trip was an excursion for learning. But they preferred this to the alternative. When the fourth week came, they were once again brought back out to the field. Early in the morning, they were transported to the same forward base John had brought them to before. On arrival, John was there to greet him, though he seemed to have brought friends. Faye saw John and Amara chatting with a few others. She recognized Tana and Phaidon, and struggled to recognize the very large man that Tana was linking arms with. While she saw Shadowbane and Ilinka nearby, she couldn't guess who the 8 others around them were. Worse was that she couldn't pick up the slightest bit of their auras. Not one of them could be felt, and that made her neck tingle. Or perhaps it was the weird-looking girl with black and white hair and eyes of different colors. John turned to them with a wide smile, dressed in his normal coat. "Hello there, learn youngsters. It's good to see you guys back out in the field. 2 weeks of constant training must have been difficult, but as my grandpappy used to say, you always work as hard as you want to party. Unfortunately, in my age I've grown away from such exciting activities." Huh. Both Amara and the large man nearby barked a laugh, John scratching his nose as Amara smiled and scrutinized him. "You're so full of shit. Anyway, Instructor Bria, go ahead and take them to the front. The general is ready to receive." "Yes, sir." Instructor Bria gave him a salute, Faye following the rest of the students as John turned and continued speaking with his group. Nearby, an unknown model of plane was idling silently, waiting for its passengers. I leaned back as a butler served us drinks. Placing mine on the table, I waited for him to leave before glancing at Vetsmon. The afternoon clouds passed by in the sky outside, the plane suffering little turbulence as we made our way to the Holy See. Tana leaned against Vetsmon, as Amara leaned against me. Most of the Desert Eagles were back at base preparing for another mission. I couldn't let them relax for too long. They had to keep sharp, and it wasn't like there weren't a dozen missions that they could take on. With just us 4 in the plane, I could speak freely. "I'm sad to see you go. We barely got a month or so together before you two went gallivanting around the Holy See. Well, we're already launching offensives on the mainland. I'm sure you already knew that, though." "Indeed." I smiled, making Vetsmon chuckle. I naturally had eyes in the sky over there, though getting a view of the heart of the mainland was proving impossible for now. The order can't go without its meatiest punching bag. Not when we're hunting monsters like you, no. Got any advice for trying to hunt a Versal? Well, if the criteria for moving a Versal here are high talent, skill, and excellence, then your first step toward killing them is acknowledging that all Versals are smarter than the people of this world. The second step is understanding that I'm smarter than all Versals. So think like me and you'll be on the fast track to world domination. More like annihilation. Amara muttered from my side, my eyes falling to hers and earning a bright smile. I looked back up at Vetsmon. She's not wrong. I'll keep that in mind. On a more serious note, though, if what you've told me is true, then they're obviously protected by demons. That means that unless you have overwhelming and focused power over them, killing them is unlikely, especially without consequences. They're going to be tricky and cunning. You'll walk into a lot of traps if they have any half-decent head on their shoulders. They're going to have a lot of tools at their disposal. You need to prepare some of your own. Don't rely exclusively on that body of yours. There are plenty of ways to kill you despite it, and we Versals can easily conceive of them. They will know you and your power. They will plot to kill you every time you chase them, and they will not be fair about it. So don't fall into the trap of giving a damn about honorable battle. Right? So, in a nutshell, be careful. In a nutshell. I shrugged, sipping my drink for a short second. Just remember that if a battle is fair, it wasn't properly planned. If it was properly planned, it'll hardly be fair. Vetsmon nodded, thinking in silence for a bit as I glanced at Tana. Over the past couple months, Vetsmon and Tana had spent most of their time in the Holy See. Not just spending time with Vetsmon's parents. The two also went down to the Order so that Tana could see what it was all about, courtesy of Anderson. Tana had been thinking about joining Vetsmon in his fight on the Scourge's mainland, and Anderson had tried to poach her from me. I didn't mind, of course. Tana was her own woman, and I wasn't opposed to her fighting with Vetsmon. It would have been great experience for her, and with the resources of the church, I wouldn't have been worried about her safety beyond the expected. She would have gotten stronger through her battles, and the two would be able to spend more time together, as Amara and I did. But in the end, Tana decided to remain with Iron Legion. We had our own upcoming war to fight here, and she wanted to be a part of it. It would be just as important as what Vetsmon was going to do in Scourge territory. Now it was time to separate. Vetsmon's vacation was over, and we had our own work to start doing. With the Magisterium's excursion ending, the time for chaos was approaching. By the way, Vemson suddenly asked, catching my attention. He had a big smile. When is the wedding? I chuckled and looked down at Amara, who shifted a bit closer to me. End of this year. That's when we're thinking. Are you going to announce it? No. Those who matter will be informed, and we have no intention of making it a public affair. Though I will be speaking with the Pope, I think we've decided that we want to get married in the church. Really? Vetsmon looked at me surprised, making me snicker. What's with the shock? I happen to be Catholic. I'm also a believer, though my family practices seldom. Not many nobles do. Vetsmon scratched the back of his neck with a smile. No, you're right. I guess I just forgot. Those around me are all so fervent that I see others and forget that they, too, can be devout. Don't worry, I get it. I always imagined getting married in the church. My entire family did. But after coming to this world, the idea got pushed aside. Recently, though, we've been talking about it. And since my fiancé wants to get married in the heart of the Holy See, I will make it happen. Right? Now, don't take this question as a challenge to your beliefs. I smiled and widened my eyes at Vetsmon, watching him carefully formulate his inquiry, scrutinizing all the details of his nervous body language. I already knew what he was going to ask. Are you getting married in the church because you believe in the sacrament and that it should be in the presence of the Lord, or because you have the influence to demand such a thing? Both. I want to get married in the church, and I want it to be in the greatest church in the land. I may even ask the Pope to officiate. I've heard he refuses to do weddings. I wouldn't bet on an exception. Just a bunch of naysayers. Either way, we aren't doing it to be vain. Well, maybe not entirely. How honest of you. I chuckled at Vetsmon, his eyes turning to Amara. Have you practiced in recent years, Amara? Not really. It's been difficult too, but I also haven't put forth all my effort either. Although I technically consider myself a follower, during my life that technicality was rather loose. Certainly by your standards, I wouldn't be considered one. But in recent years, I've found myself drawn to the church. Why is that? Well, she hesitated for a moment, her heart rate increasing as she made her decision to speak simply. The Scourge isn't easy to fight. They have a funny way of making you feel like fighting them is hopeless. When Iron Legion was created, I regained much of that hope, but recalling church teachings gave me more. I'm trying to keep my mind in the fight, and they help with that. Indeed, the church is the antithesis of the Scourge, their eternal enemy, both physically and spiritually. Most people find themselves where you are. The more they fight against the Scourge, the further into our fold they come. Some people can handle themselves better than others, but even in the Order, I don't know a single person who isn't as strong spiritually as they are with their magic. The two traits usually follow each other. And if they don't? I asked quickly, Vetsmon turning to me. He pondered for a moment. Well, then they usually collapse. They can't handle the stress and pressure. I've heard of some who have decommissioned themselves, others who were forcefully retired when they became unstable. I've even heard of some who have turned traitor, their minds corrupted. Some people forget, but this war is as spiritual as it is physical. By both mediums can it be lost. Unless your firepower is overwhelming enough. Can't corrupt anything spiritual if the minds behind it are painted on a wall. I chuckled and sipped my drink, Vetsmon silent, staring at me. He turned away just as I was about to look back at him. Well, Amara, If you ever need texts or guidance, you know how to contact me. Of course, though I've been reading enough books lately, I'm still studying all the spatial spells and enchantments that my family has. Amara sighed, recalling the many sleepless nights she's been having recently in her study. We continued to chat until we landed in the Holy See. There, Tana and Vetsmon said goodbye before Vetsmon boarded a helicopter waiting for him. He left, and soon after we were back in the air. Our destination was Wonderland. I needed to check the latest prototype developed there. Right this way, sir. One of the researchers led me to a large room. And there was an observation chamber, outside which was a large wind tunnel. Mounted to a steel foundation was the latest aircraft engine prototype. Both Amara and Tana stared at it for a time as the researcher spoke to me. We've managed to conduct plenty of tests after acquiring the elemental crystal stock from Continuance. Before, using white crystals presented difficulties due to the low power output. The numbers you gave us were simply unattainable without white crystals of far greater power than we could get our hands on. Thankfully, elemental crystals don't have this problem. With enough of them, theoretically, any amount of power output is possible. Continuance also provided an abundance of high-authority elemental crystals. Thus, the next problem to solve was the best way to take advantage of this theoretically infinite power in the way of the magic used and the engine that guided that magic. This, so far, is the most powerful and most stable result. He waved to the engine on the stand. Funnily enough, the engine was blown open, looking like half of it had been destroyed in an explosion. Didn't look like a stable prototype to me, but I just stayed quiet. Our design was based on the thermal rocket propulsion specifications you gave us. We used a set of fire crystals and air crystals. The fire crystals provide the energy and heat, and the air crystals provide the mass. The energy from the fire crystals is directly imparted to the mass from the air crystal and expelled to give thrust. The efficiency is extremely high, as is the thrust. During our recent test, we achieved simulated speeds in excess of 20,000 miles per hour. Amara's eyes bulged, my head slowly nodding. But the researcher dipped his head slightly, flipping through the documents on his aerial. But we underestimated the pressure within the engine. Achieving those speeds caused catastrophic failure, but not necessarily due to lack of material reinforcement. Theoretically, an Authority 8 reinforcement enchantment should have handled the pressures just fine, but due to the imperfect fabrication of the chambers and guidance nozzles, the stresses on certain regions of the structure exceeded the tolerance of the enchantment. And so we've hit our wall. Yes, sir. The researcher nodded, the destroyed engine in front of us suddenly making sense. I had long predicted that magic would hit a ceiling in how much it could compensate. The people of this world had yet to conceive of the extremity of forces involved with these kinds of systems. For them, it was always just a matter of enchanting the material with higher authority magic. Now, they were finally running into a precision issue. On Earth, even the tiniest imperfections, whether it was in the fabrication of a sheet of aluminum or in the atomic structure of a metal that had suffered microfractures, would lead to massively degraded tolerances that would lead to the same result before me. Magic was amazing. It had just achieved high hypersonic speeds with a fabrication method equating in relative precision to a blacksmith's forgery. But now, physics was demanding its place at the table. To achieve anything greater, these researchers would have to start giving a damn about its rules. That meant precision of a magnitude I hadn't yet introduced to them due to the demand for infrastructure and technology beyond what was feasible in years past. Even now, with bottomless dollars and materials, building up the tech and skill required to pull this off would be extremely difficult. On Earth, technological advancement was all organic. It was one step after another with all the nitty-gritty details thoroughly documented. Inventions begot the science to make them, which generated more inventions, all of them acting as the foundation for one another. But on this planet, I was the foundation, and what I provided certainly wasn't complete. There were all kinds of holes that had been patched and ignored by magic for the sake of immediate results. Entire bodies of study were outright missing from the equation. Now, we were hitting a new ceiling incapable of being broken without the foundation we had once ignored. And unfortunately, filling all the holes in our knowledge, educating the wide scientific community, and then training the artisans on new ways to manufacture would all take time we didn't have. I stared at the broken engine in the wind tunnel for a short while before sighing. Write this down, I muttered. The researcher hurriedly creating a new document. I'm imposing new limits. I want an engine capable of 2,000 miles per hour with the least powerful reinforcements and highest fuel efficiency possible. I'll go over your records and documentation later to provide milestone numbers, as well as aircraft specifications in line with potential engine designs. From now on, it's application over theory. You've achieved the goals of this project, so you can consider it put on hold. Sir, if I may. The researcher hesitantly spoke, everything I said quickly written down word for word. I believe we can do much more here. If we adjust the design, we can compensate for the precision issue. There's far more potential to be unearthed, especially when we consider various methods of heat transfer between the fire crystal and the generated working fluid. I understand there's far more potential. Believe me when I say that nobody understands how much potential there is here more than me. However, the law of diminishing returns is coming into play. It's no longer worth it to continue compensating. We need to solve the precision issue before proceeding further, and so, the new Mach 3 project I'll be starting will both serve as a tempering ground for that solution, as well as generate practical products that can be fielded against the scourge. If you want this project to be funded in the future, you'll need to hit the milestones I'm going to set in place. Understood, sir. He seemed dejected, but it's not like he didn't understand my logic. There was limited manpower available, so unfortunately, I had to focus Wonderland's direction. The number of projects undergoing simultaneous development was pushing the limit as it was. There simply weren't enough researchers at a suitable standard, and that standard was steadily increasing. It was all about time. I needed both innovation and results. Sometimes I had to tip the scales more toward results instead of innovation for the sake of time. After all, the scourge couldn't be killed fast enough, and they wouldn't slow their own mutation. I had already seen the anti-air troops the scourge was rolling out against the Templars on the island of Retribution. When they started fielding them on our side of the continent, I intended to be one step ahead. They had prepared countermeasures for subsonic flight. I would show them supersonics, cementing our air superiority. By the time they had anything better, I'd already be 2 steps further. I pat the researcher on the shoulder, turning away and walking out with Amara and Tana. Keep up the good work. And don't let yourself forget why we're doing all this. All the theory in the world is useless if we're too dead to build anything with it. Of course, sir. That time an American was reincarnated into another world. By S.P. Forda. Chapter 283. More to come. April 3rd, 628. I stood in the airfield of Camp Phoenix, staring at a small group of Nephilim. The dark of night prevailed in this part of the airfield. They were being guarded by 2 soldiers. Of the original population of Nephilim that stepped onto this camp, there were half a tenth left. 8 students stood before me, all of them naturally more behaved than the other 95% that had been expelled from Iron Legion for disobedience and hostility. Was I surprised? Quite the contrary. I had expected, and was hoping, for this to happen. In fact, I expected it with such certainty that I hadn't ordered the instructors to haze or drive them to anger. While the original discrimination could be considered grounds for enraging them, it wasn't like they hadn't been offered the same opportunities as those who had gone to the glass desert. The instructors had done things according to the rules, and the Nephilim had nobody to blame but themselves for being expelled. Half of them were gone within the first week. The other half had reached their limit over the subsequent 3 weeks. Those left were more disciplined than the rest, but I hardly believe they were any less hostile. In fact, their discipline stemmed from both deeper intelligence and greater evil. I could sense the hatred in their aura, even though they stood rigidly with neutral faces. They knew how to hold their anger. They wouldn't be controlled by it. That didn't mean they wouldn't let it fester. Corrupted wouldn't be anything less. Silence prevailed until another plane landed, driving over and opening. Inside were the rest of the Magisterium students, the normal humans. They stepped out, dressed in standard-issue Iron Legion armor, something the Nephilim lacked since I refused to arm my enemies so directly. The puppet master glanced to the side, sighing when he saw how few Nephilim there were. I scanned across the students, seeing their weathered postures and aura. A week mingling about the front lines was no doubt exhausting, but they would grow from the experience and take that knowledge back with them. Similar to how we had controlled the show during Iron Legion's joint operation with Stronghold Echo, these students would return and forever judge by the standards they had been shown here. By extension, They would be one more influential group of people that would go on to indirectly promote my way of warfare and, by extension, promote my products. The kingdom would be forced to adapt, nobles would desire my weapons, and I'd be even richer than I was now. I gave the students before me a few words. Congratulations. You've all performed well over the last month, have learned military tactics that few outside Iron Legion are able to learn. Although I'm sure you've all been reminded enough, all of the training and knowledge you've acquired is for the sake of not just resisting the scourge, but defeating it. Mindless battle, like that which the kingdom has engaged in for too many decades, will do nothing more than spell humanity's doom. My tools of warfare offer a new way, a systematic method of pure extermination that preserves our lives while multiplying the deaths of our enemies. But what allows this method to thrive is the mindset we carry, the hatred we bear against the scourge. We must not forget why we fight or the sacrifices we've made, lest they try to take advantage of our complacency and destroy us instead. I glanced at the Nephilim before turning to the Puppet Master. I leave them to you, Puppet Master. Don't let the scourge take any more of them while underneath the eye of the kingdom. Don't worry. I don't ever intend to allow what happened to your class ever again. That was a hard lesson for me to learn that day. Just remember that they don't have to kill us to defeat us. I shook his hand. All the students boarding the plane to return to the capital. I saw Faye, giving her a smile before the hatch closed. Soon they were in the air. I watched them fly for a short time before turning and walking to a nearby vehicle, boarding and getting driven to another section of the airfield. Underneath a camouflaged canopy, I saw several armored men and women from Sector 4. They were checking their supplies, a few helicopters nearby ready to fly. Amara was there waiting for me, as were Polly and Jasmine. They turned to me as I approached, the soldiers giving quick salutes before going back to preparing. Ready? Yup. All high-value targets are still in the area. Jasmine responded from behind a terminal. On the screen was a live view of a town. The entire town was our target. It was entirely populated with Nephilim and a well-known development site. Once upon a time, the entire town had been normally human. But over the span of just a month, a small group of mid-authority Nephilim had corrupted every last person there. The majority of them were not turned willingly, but unfortunately, it didn't matter any longer. The town was attempting to expand and usurp other nearby settlements, and they were doing it employing hostile means. They would send groups of Nephilim to infiltrate and harass, taking over leadership and promoting themselves before corrupting more. The town we were looking at now was like a base, and I intended to begin my campaign there. John. Polly walked up to me, the two of us stepping to the side and speaking quietly. She had a look of concern on her face. I know what you're doing and why, and I believe in it. But I can't help but feel like this is a point of no return. Is there really no other way to go about this? I looked into her eyes. There wasn't any hesitation or nervousness. It was just plain concern for the future and for what we were about to do. I responded with a question of my own. Is it possible as of this moment to reverse corruption? No. Are the Nephilim corrupted? Yes. Then they are our enemy, and the enemy must be killed before they can be allowed to spread. I know. But they were once human, and as simple as we try to make it, we're about to slaughter several thousand people, including those who are incapable of even fighting. I stared at her for several moments before glancing around. Everyone was watching us. I could see the gloom around some of the soldiers, my pale horsemen. They were all loyal, they all believed in the cause. They would do what I told them to, as would Polly. That didn't change the nature of our task, though. I looked back at Polly, raising my hand and grabbing her shoulder. I pulled her in, leaning down to speak into her ear. This blood is not on your hands. Not unless you want it to be. I raised myself back up, looking over Polly's head at the others. All of you are moving by my order. Is that understood? They all silently snapped off salutes. I nodded and let go of Polly. We leave in 5. I left those words, stepping away from Polly and letting her think. I walked up to Amara. Are you sure you don't want to stay behind? You don't get to dirty your hands without me. Nor do you get to take all the blame. I'm going with you. Have I ever told you how much I love you? You have. Every day, actually. Oh, good. Just making sure. I gave her a kiss on the forehead before turning. The nearby soldiers boarded the helicopters, a new model designed for stealth. Even spinning right next to us, I couldn't hear a sound. Amara and I boarded last, and soon after the doors shut, the helicopters became invisible, and we took off. Approaching target. 1 minute. I heard the pilot's voice over the TACnet, scanning the soldiers around me. Their armor was pitch black, void of all markings, and lacked the standard design of armors found at Iron Legion. Even the technology within it was different, from the hardware to the software. Nothing on the armor nor their bodies could be traced back to Iron Legion or Son Industries. Nevertheless, it had even greater functionality than the latest production models. Everything was enhanced and designed specifically for what was about to happen now, not to mention the weapons the soldiers held. I glanced at the weapon on one of their laps nearby. It was called a crystal rifle, and the one the soldiers were using was a precision variant called the XCR-108. It was the magical version of a gun working by the same mechanisms as the tank cannons. It used propellant to fire a crystal through a barrel at extreme speeds, the crystal detonating on impact and releasing whatever magic it was enchanted with. I hadn't neglected the possibility of creating guns in this world. Unfortunately, it simply hadn't been worth it in the past, not to mention the logistical nightmare of trying to arm a military with it. However, for Sector 4, nothing was off limits. These experimental prototypes that I had Wonderland work on in the background could finally be field-tested. The technology wasn't difficult. It was simply a scaled-down version of the tank cannon. However, that itself demanded more precision, quickly running into the same issue that the hypersonic program at Wonderland had been stumped with. These prototypes were the best of the many products built and were accordingly expensive, not to mention the manufacture of cartridges and bullets. A production line for actual smokeless powder had also been set up to be used for propellant, but it was small and inefficient. This mission would be using up a significant portion of the stockpiled gunpowder and bullets, but I was hardly concerned. The soldiers had been using them during the Magisterium's excursion, training their aim and handling. For now, only knights would be using them, their strength affording them more reliable accuracy. That meant half the force carrying out this operation wasn't armed with a crystal rifle. However, they were not to be left out, for they were armed with a scaled-down version of the tank turrets. The XMR-138 mana rifle was similar in appearance, a rifle-shaped weapon enchanted with high-intensity magical spells and powered by an elemental crystal. Each elemental crystal acted like a magazine, capable of explosively powering a matching elemental enchantment several times before depleting and demanding replacement. The difficult part about making these wasn't construction or even logistics, but the spellwork itself. New spells had to be developed that could properly take advantage of the elemental crystals while being suitable for taking on the role of a firearm, at least according to my expectations of it. On top of that, since testing them would be carried out in a covert manner, they needed to be adjusted for missions like these. This demanded precision not in fabrication, but in the enchantment. Amara had been working hard over the last couple months working on this project alongside her studies of spatial spells. Now making her way to becoming a professional enchanter, she could participate in suitable Wonderland projects where she offered magical expertise backed by my exclusive knowledge. With swappable enchantment modules, these mana rifles could change their spells with even more ease than changing a caliber. The crystal rifles could do the same with different bullets as well. Both of them were versatile, the crystal rifles slightly more so than the mana rifles. They were both extremely similar, but represented two different logistical demands and scaling potential. Today, we'd be getting a better glimpse at which one was better. I stood and pulled open the helicopter hatch, looking down at the town below us. With a population of 7,100 Nephilim, it wasn't exactly small, not to mention that it had previously been a farming export, so there were houses and tilled plots of land in the distance. I looked up into the distance, seeing the other helicopters stationing themselves at their predetermined points. We hadn't attracted any attention yet, but that would be changing very quickly. I took a step back away from the hatch, my exosuit appearing and enveloping my body. I put on the helmet as it did so, the HUD blinking to life and running a half-second diagnostic. Everything booted, and I linked to the TACnet. In my vision, every Nephilim I could see in the town below was highlighted and marked, the indicators red denoting an enemy. I looked back up, the helicopters standing by. Green light. I spoke into the TACnet, starting a count on my exosuit's stopwatch. Everyone moved. The knights started dropping from the helicopters, jetpacks bringing them down to the ground. While they dropped through the sky, warlocks started casting spells around the town. Amara was one of them. I saw flames flicker in multiple areas, massive spellwork blooming in the sky before vanishing with the cast. My vision brightened as a dense wall of fire encircled the entire town, spanning entire miles of distance. It rose into the sky, clearly marking the area of our attack. There were screams in the town as everyone still awake took notice. More started waking up. Moderate authority enemies started stepping out, their energy no longer dormant. They wouldn't be allowed to do anything. I kneeled in the doorway of the helicopter, those around me dropping out the other door. Amara remained behind me, watching. I brought out a sniper, a TEC-50E, an updated version of the original TEC-50 with all the bells and whistles of what the future offered. A digital telescopic sight, a ballistic predictor, exosuit integration, and an ability to chamber high-tech, high-pressure rounds while still retaining the old glory of the .50 BMG. I chambered an 860-grain high-explosive round that was rated for 4,200 feet per second. After my empowerment, I didn't even want to guess what the numbers would sit at. I shouldered the sniper and aimed at one particular building, larger than all the others and sitting near the center of the town. The sole Authority 9 combatant was there. I could sense him scramble out of his house, standing in front of the window for a second before leaving. He ran through the front door before looking around. One man ran up to him, the two talking. I took my chance. I centered the reticle on his head and pulled the trigger, the weight of it awfully light. The recoil kicked my shoulder despite the exosuit, speaking to its power. I didn't even have the time to wonder what it would feel like without the exosuit before the bullet sliced through the Authority 9's head. The high explosive kicked and released a sizable explosion, reducing the rest of his body to gore. I remained there for a second longer before sending the sniper away, bringing out Totenstall and stepping out of the helicopter. Amara followed, the two of us dropping a few thousand feet. Our jetpacks flared, and we were gentled to the ground. We dropped on one side of the town, just outside of it. The massive wall of fire continued to blaze. All who tried to run through it reduced to a crisp. However, there was one portion of the perimeter that was open, one portion that wasn't on fire. With the wall so tall, everyone in the town could see it. An obvious funnel, an obvious trap, but it still worked. The other teams landed within the town, within the fire, and started hunting. They systematically swept through each road and each building, killing every single Nephilim they came across. With every step, they were either leveling a building and killing everything inside, or killing those who were running away from them. Amara and I stood within the open perimeter, the gateway to freedom, and we waited for our pale horsemen to drive the Nephilim toward us. It didn't take them long. We saw crowds of people flood from the alleys and streets, first dozens, then hundreds. Some of them froze when they saw us. Some continued charging. Some of them were around Authority 4 or 5, and they sprinted toward us with a deranged look in their eye, rage painted across their face. I saw the horns on their head and the marks across their bodies, and I lifted Totenstall, whose barrel glowed bright red. I was glad I had a helmet on. Amara couldn't see me smile. The trigger depressed, and the familiar feeling of recoil kicked into my arms. With the exosuit, the weapon was lighter than every, my psyche lightly pouring into every round. I drew a line of lead across those that ran toward us. Nobody, not even those of intermediate authority, took any more than a few bullets to kill. My arms steadily adjusted, providing a generous volume of firepower to every sector with an enemy. Amara didn't even get the chance to cast a spell. All of the first wave cut down, her mana resting within her palms. Totenstall released some smoke from his barrel. I scanned across the mounds of fresh corpses. More batches soon came, trampling over their dead and charging us. I fired again, cut them all down just like the last. Another few hundred dead. This repeated several times. At some point, Amara stepped up and forced me to let her take over. I stopped firing, and she started letting off spells, killing with just as much ease as I did. After some time, and after taking turns, our kill count rose to over 2,000. I saw some of the pale horsemen emerge from the perimeter. It didn't take long to sweep through the town when every enemy was so weak, not to mention all the scanners preventing a single one of them from slipping past. Anything living, anything with aura, would be found and hunted. Not even an underground tunnel could save them. The scanners were ground penetrating. I killed a few more batches before no more showed. Then I saw the rest of the pale horsemen emerge. The massive wall of flame went dark, flickering out, the night regaining its eerie silence. I heard a voice over the TACnet from our eye in the sky. Scan complete. No hostiles detected. Town cleared. I nodded, the helicopters coming down from the sky and landing around us. Silently, we all boarded, quickly taking off. I glanced at the stopwatch, deactivating it. 16 minutes, 49 seconds. The ride back to base was quiet. Once we landed, everyone jumped out and went to the armory, storing all the experimental rifles. I spoke with Polly for a short time, sending her the report I wrote on the way back before leaving with Amara. We went to our own residence within the Glass Desert, a private area within Sector 4's confines of the base. Once there, we settled down and readied for bed. It wasn't even past midnight, but both of us were tired. We lay in bed, the light on while I went over a few more things on my aerial. After some time, though, I shut out the light and prepared to go to sleep. In the silence of our bedroom, I heard Amara mutter, "You're so much stronger than I am." I turned my head, looking at Amara. She stared up at the ceiling, eyes still wide open. "Is it as easy for you as you make it look?" I was silent for a bit, eventually muttering back, "Yes, it is. I know you're a bit used to it, from your time in the black markets. But I struggle to understand how something like this can become so easy even with that experience." I didn't respond, the two of us silent for a few moments before she turned to me, her eyes glowing a bit with mana. "We just killed thousands of people. Slaughtered them like rodents. It was so unbearably easy. The mana I used in those spells was regenerated seconds after. Most of those people weren't even past their first authority. They would have been ordinary if they hadn't been turned into Nephilim. T the young. How many young did we kill?" I thought for a second before answering. "Around 30. There weren't many." Reports from earlier stalking said that they had sent the young away to the big cities, likely for their sick rituals. "What rituals?" "Tomorrow I can show you. We have video of it, most of it coming from the town we just eradicated. All you need to know is that nearly all of the children in that town were deliberately kept human. Tomorrow I'll show you why." I felt Amara's anarchy flare before quickly simmering down, tears welling up in her eyes. I could tell how hard she tried to keep her emotions down. "I just don't know if that's supposed to make me feel better about this or not. Amara, normally I'd tell you not to have any sympathy for any of them." I moved over and held her, my voice lowering. "But I think it would be better for at least one of us to have some. Leave all the thinking for tomorrow. For now, just do what you can to get some sleep. It's been a long day." I gave her a kiss on the forehead before settling in. I remained awake as long as she did, only getting to sleep after another couple hours. My last thought was about how successful of a mission it was, and how many more were to come. That time an American was reincarnated into another world by Spade. Chapter 284, Heaven. June 8th, 628. I still think we're attracting too much attention. I sighed, kicking my feet up on a footrest as Erhan brought Polly and I another drink. The two of us lounged in front of my estate's pool in some swimwear, staring out as the late afternoon sun shifted the sky into sherbet colors. It was just the two of us on the lounge chairs, Jasmine floating face down in the pool. She was probably all right. "I think we're not doing enough. We've been engaging in raids every other day for 2 months now, and you say it's not enough?" "Nope. What's our kill count?" "Well, with about 30 villages and towns raided and wiped out, each numbering between 3 and 8,000, I'd say we've killed roughly 150,000. I smiled and nodded. "Very good. Unfortunately, they're only spreading faster. They now have millions of hopped-up demonoids across the kingdom, and several times more who are just waiting their turn to be corrupted and empowered. It's an infestation that can't be eradicated fast enough." "I get that, but if you're trying to save the people, then backing off a bit might be beneficial." Polly tapped her aerial, sending a file that popped up in my vision. It was a video of a mass migration of Nephilim. Tens of thousands of them were treading ground on foot and wagon. Their destination was a nearby major city with a population of about 3 million. Your goal of striking fear has certainly been achieved. Now you've got entire villages and towns turning desolate as their inhabitants migrate to the populated cities. You're hastening the invasion indirectly. Sounds about right. I took another sip of my drink, releasing a breath of ethanol and smacking my lips. I sent away the video feed, sighing. Sounds like we're going to have cities full of Nephilim soon. Since they're certainly not going there to be productive members of society, those millions of people will be coerced and brainwashed into both accepting them and becoming them. Being demonic scum is a full-time job. Polly glanced at me silently, pausing. Is this your goal? My goal is the eradication of the scourge and all who may ally with them. Even if you have to hasten their takeover. This isn't a covert war to stop them. It's a war to give them exactly what they want. I returned Polly's gaze. Is that a problem? Fuck off, John. I've been dealing with your spontaneous bullshit since you stepped off that rail at Stronghold Charlie. I certainly can't be surprised by you anymore, but I expect you to drop the arrogance for me too. You're not the only one who can handle rough topics and unconventional solutions, and don't forget who runs Sector 4 in your absence. I smiled as she finished her words, chuckling. Yeah, you're so drunk. We've only had a few drinks. You're not a lightweight, are you? Oh, careful with your words, boy, or mommy might have to teach you what real drinking looks like. I'd hate to embarrass you like that. I unfortunately ain't a stranger to getting drunk under the table. The only ones who could do so though were closeted alcoholic family members or some friends who brewed moonshine on the side. Hee hee, pretty sure my Uncle Bubba drank enough daily to kill a bull. I laughed a bit, Polly sipping her drink with a smile. You know, you've never told me about your family. Your record said that you have none. A complicated situation. Have I ever told you that I'm from another world? I don't know. Perhaps you did, and it just slipped my mind. I smiled, giving Polly the general gist that I had given the others. After my brief explanation, she nodded and gazed off into the horizon. Indeed, I definitely can't be surprised by you anymore. Either way, I'm glad you actually have family, even if they aren't here. I assumed you were orphaned before. Yes, it's a slight silver lining. I don't know if I'll ever get to see them again, but at least it was just me. I certainly wouldn't want them to be brought to this fucked up planet too. I can understand that thought, but I know it doesn't make it easier. It's a good thing you have me around for emotional support. Well, you and my smoking hot fiancé. Forgive me, but I usually default to indulging in her emotional support. She scoffed. As you should. Lord knows how often I have to find my husband with all the stress you cause me. We took large sips of our drink, my smile widening. Oh yeah? Aunt Polly still has that youthful vigor, eh? Don't speak like I'm an old lady. Age is just experience at this level, and I've got you amateurs topped by decades. Is that why you've got a layer of makeup on your neck? I shifted my head, spotting a concealed hickey on her nape. She shrugged, looking away and twirling her drink. Maybe. You go girl. Cheers to that shit. I lifted my glass, Polly unable to hide her smile as we clinked our glasses. After a moment of silence, she sighed, our humor calming. All right, well, I think I get what you're trying to do. By my guesses, you're going to indirectly kill many millions doing it. But it might just work. It will work, and it'll cost a lot more than just some millions. The only other alternative is borderline extinction, so I'm willing to make the trade. Polly just hummed in response. After another few minutes of silence and pondering, Jasmine started moving again and swam out of the pool. We all hung around for a time, night eventually falling and the cool air urging us inside. After cleaning and sobering up with cigars, I had a small dinner with them before checking my aerial. I smiled when I saw the message from Wonderland. How timely. Hey Polly, want to come with me and see something cool? I suppose. What is it? A plane, and I'm about to put on a show with it. Come on. You can change into your uniform on the way there. You too, Jasmine. Yay. I chuckled as we walked out, Erhun driving the three of us to the airfield in my backyard. We took a plane to Wonderland where we disembarked and headed to a nearby hangar. The huge white doors were closed, and upon entering, the two of us were greeted with a lit interior and a large plane surrounded by mechanical and magical devices. This world's newest generation of supersonic aircraft. Over 2 months ago, after giving the project director my set of specifications and milestones, a multitude of prototypical supersonic jet engines were born. They were massively dialed back compared to the flagship model that exploded under its own pressure, capable of no more than half of the speed. But they were still fast, efficient, and most importantly, reliable. These jet engines weren't air-breathing. They could actually be considered rocket engines. Their fuel was entirely internal, requiring no intakes, and relying on the expulsion of a working fluid to produce thrust. But instead of using liquid hydrogen and oxygen as fuel, these engines used fire and air crystals. The fire crystals provided the energy, and the air crystals provided the fluid for expansion and thrust. By using a variety of magics, These two could work in tandem to not just produce raw propulsion, but direct the power in such a way that made them just as capable as modern pure tech engines while being far more energy efficient. I gazed at the plane before me. At 75 feet long with a 50-foot wingspan, the plane was reminiscent of the X-15 in frame design with wings positioned closer to the rear. It was like a tortilla chip with a pointed neck at the front, the wings making it triangular and sparing it from the missile with the pilot accusations. The project manager ran up to me when I entered, an excited look on his face. "The X-51 is ready for your stress test, sir." "Fabulous. We'll begin immediately. Escort Polly and Jasmine here to the control center." "Yes, sir." I waved to them before walking toward the jet. The engineers within the hangar scurried around it, making last-second preparations. Before stepping in, I peered into my 8th star and found a spirit calling out to me. Being in front of a proper jet seemed to have spurred it to life. The Exo-Atmospheric Flight Suit, Model EFS-99, avionic configuration. A flight suit made for extreme condition pilots. The EFS-99 was capable of more than just sustaining the body under high-G maneuvers. In a future world where most aircraft were unmanned, the only pilots left were those who flew the kinds of planes that weren't merely atmospheric. The suit appeared over my body, fabrics and polymers melding against my form. After adjusting some straps, I lifted the helmet. It had no visor, the front a metal shield with several bright lights that looked like eyes and the sharp yet smooth edges of precision fabrication. I slipped the helmet on, its frame clamping around my head before locking in with the rest of the suit. After that, I felt the ambient air pressure increase just slightly, the HUD flashing to life. The visuals allowed me more than a normal human field of view, my peripheral vision being extended to such a point that it felt like I had eyes on the back of my head. It took a few seconds of calibration on the helmet's part and some adjustment on mine, but I quickly adapted an appreciation for it. The helmet scanned the aircraft as I climbed a ladder into the cockpit. Once I settled in, the engineers around me helped position the straps and buckles, securing me to the seat. At the same time, the hangar doors started sliding open, revealing the dark runway. I linked my helmet systems with my aerial, tying it in with the control center's node net. Then it was linked with the plane itself, the suite hosting a variety of avionics that didn't exist a year ago. Remembering the manual that had been developed for this plane and written a mere week ago, I started flicking all the switches on the panel in front of me, starting up the plane as the engineers closed the canopy and cleared the area. With power and wheels active, I drove it out of the hangar and onto the runway, following the path of lights that suddenly blinked to life on the ground. I was quickly in position for launch, hearing the project manager's voice in my ear. Polly watched the project manager, his name Faruga, speak with John as they kick-started the plane. She felt like Faruga was being more timid than normal, probably because she was here in uniform. Although Wonderland wasn't a part of Iron Legion, Sector 4 became its security force after Iron Legion was established. Polly, being the head of Sector 4, naturally knew about many of the operations here as well as most of the agents responsible for maintaining secrecy and security. As a consequence of their job, these enchanters and researchers feared them, as they should. Polly, being at the top of it all, was one of the most feared individuals among those who knew of her, perhaps only second to John. While John could be charismatic in front of his troops, she maintained the image demanded by her position. That meant she was the bloody dagger in John's left hand, the face of all the atrocities they had ever carried out. And with a word, Polly could end anybody's career at Son Industries' most elite and covert institution. Wonderland had become like a heaven for those at the Magic Spire, and none who came ever wanted to leave. She just hoped that her pressure wouldn't affect Faruga's ability to conduct this test, not that he was the pilot. Ready engine, start. Polly saw the single engine of the plane flash to life before suddenly exploding with power. A column of flame was ejected from the engine, the portion closest to the engine slightly blue, the rest a powerful yellow and orange. On the wall in front of her, she could see all of the diagnostics of the plane, including a visual feed of John in the cockpit. The helmet on his face looked eerie. She now knew it was something from his world, but she couldn't imagine what kind of unholy level of technology allowed it to work. John's voice echoed through the room. All systems green on my end. No explosions yet, so I think we're good for takeoff. Control concurs, Falcon. All hands, Go for takeoff. Polly glanced around. All of the engineers through the room and behind terminals checking their systems and giving a thumbs up. Right then, the door suddenly opened. Polly was surprised to see Amara there. Seeing Furuga turn to her, Amara waved him off. Don't worry about me. What's he doing now? Testing the new plane. Right? He said that was tonight. She sighed, Polly noticing how tired she looked. She knew Amara worked on one of the Wonderland teams. Seemed she had been pulling long hours. She sat by Polly and Jasmine, the three women staying quiet and watching the camera showing them a view of the plane outside. Once everyone had given their clearances, Furuga spoke. Falcon, you're cleared for takeoff. The skies are yours. Roger. Feeding auxiliary avionics to your system. Furuga's brows raised as the screen in front of them suddenly glitched, more numbers appearing. There was Mach, pressure, G-force, internal and external temperature, and several other atmospheric and mechanical measurements that they didn't quite recognize. All right, pay attention because this is going to happen fast. Their eyes shifted once more when they heard John's voice, the video feed of the plane showing movement. The flames spewing from the engine multiplied in intensity, the initial portion of the fire column becoming conical. The plane quickly picked up speed and shot down the runway. Polly saw it tilt up, wheels lifting off the ground as the engine blazed with power, torching the ground and rising into the sky. They all watched the speed on the screen climb, the plane hitting 500 miles per hour before 20 seconds even passed. The G-forces John endured rose steadily, his nose pointed almost straight up. They watched the numbers climb at a rate scarcely believable. Polly kept in mind the speed of Iron Legion production planes, which sat around 400 miles per hour. She saw this plane reach triple that speed in seconds, Furuga barely reacting, reaching supersonic speeds. A timer appeared, clocking how long since launch John had been climbing. Once it hit 60 seconds, Polly glanced at the altitude, seeing 80,000 feet being blown past. The camera feed zoomed in, the visual adjusted for night vision and showing the blazing signature of the engine. Other metrics detailed the temperature of the plane's surface as well as that of the nozzle, which were reaching thousands of degrees. There were a dozen other metrics from air drag to a graph for aerodynamic heating rise with Mach number, none of which Polly recognized the meaning of, but needing no more than eyes to see all of them sharply climbing. 2 minutes came, and John flew past 150,000 feet faster than he did the first 100,000. He was only getting faster. 200,000 feet was bypassed like a footnote, and Polly still saw John's speed fly past 2,000 miles an hour just as casually. She felt like she couldn't properly react to what she was seeing. At minute 3, 250,000 feet was reached, as was 3,000 miles per hour. Some seconds later, Furuga muttered with a chill in his breath. Approaching hypersonic speeds. Polly glanced at the Mach number, seeing it quickly blink decimal by decimal until it hit 5.0. Soon after, the plane reached 350,000 feet, John's voice echoing, activating attitude rockets and leveling out. Atmospheric density reaching 0. Beginning approach to 400,000 feet and accelerating to Mach 6. His rate of climb noticeably slowed, nose lowering from its vertical climb. 400,000 feet hit, as did the milestone of Mach 6, gradually slowing. Polly could see that the engine was being throttled, no longer in full burn. The timer counted just over 4 minutes. It happened so fast Polly was mute. After another minute, John spoke. All lights are green on my end. Control. Copy. Control concurs. No anomalies according to our sensors. Good. Is my dove there? Furuga's brows raised. He turned around and eyed Amara, who perked up. Yes, I'm here. My apologies, Dove. I wanted both of us to experience this together, but I couldn't take you on such a dangerous trip. I had to test the waters first. I can't say I'm not irked, Falcon, but your consideration is one of the things I love about you. I'll forgive you, only if you promise to take me for a joyride later. I'll pinky swear you when I get back down. Amara chuckled, her eyes glued to the live feed of John in the cockpit. So, when are you coming back down? Don't tell me you plan to circle the planet. Not today. I'll do it when we finally make a stable Mach 10 engine. For now, though, I need to verify something. What's that? Space. Ever wonder about its true nature? Amara noticed the altitude meter start rising again, her heart thumping a bit harder in her chest. I suppose. I thought you said it was just a void of nothingness. Yes, in the most generic sense. But you see, Where I come from, we have an interesting scripture. It comes from the first book, Genesis, the creation of the universe. John's nose turned back up, going to full burn once more. He climbed to Mach 6.5, his altitude blazing past 500,000 feet. Not long after, he hit the 100-mile mark. Then, he started speaking the scripture. In the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth. And the earth was without form and void, and darkness was upon the face of the deep. And the Spirit of God moved upon the face of the waters. And God said, "Let there be light," and there was light. Amara felt chills as he flew past 150 miles. Several metrics on the screens across the wall changed, shifting from atmospheric and aerodynamic measurements to astronautical measurements. And God saw the light, that it was good, and God divided the light from the darkness. And God called the light day, and the darkness he called night. And the evening and the morning were the first day. 200 miles, and the Mach number long disappeared. There was no speed of sound when there was no atmosphere for sound to travel. The true speed measurement put John at 7,000 miles per hour and climbing. Amara glanced at an alert that popped up on one screen. Entering low planetary orbit. And God said, "Let there be a firmament in the midst of the waters, and let it divide the waters from the waters." And God made the firmament, and divided the waters which were under the firmament from the waters which were above the firmament. And it was so. And God called the firmament heaven. His words ended, and so did the audio feed. All the screens on the wall froze, alarms blaring as all the avionics signals were cut. The rising numbers ceased to rise, and the video feed of John cut to darkness. Amara's eyes widened. What just happened? I don't know. We've lost contact. Those transmitters are good for 500 miles over the horizon, let alone line of sight. How did we lose contact? I don't know. Then fucking work on it. Someone tune another transmission array. Polly watched Amara yell at them, deciding to stay quiet and let the professionals do their work. She'd only get in the way. One panicking fiancé was more than enough for stress levels. These researchers didn't need the head of Sector 4 bearing down on them as well. Almost half an hour passed like this, nothing able to pierce the veil and reach John. Amara stood there the entire time, biting her fingernails with palpable fear coming off her. Then the screens glitched, flashing multiple times before resetting, all the metrics returning to normal and adjusting in real time. John's video feed returned, his helmet still on, nothing different from before, except for the fact that his arms were slumped, the plane in a nosedive and rapidly re-entering the atmosphere. That time an American was reincarnated into another world by Spade. Chapter 285, Significant Threats. June 8, 628. My eyes groggily opened, my head throbbing as I started to register the stimuli entering my senses. My suit was screaming at me with an unnerving sequence of sounds and voices. When my eyes focused, I could see my altimeter and the tip of my plane, nosediving 25,000 feet to kiss the ground. My eyes snapped fully open, adrenaline shooting through me as I yanked on my control stick. It was to no avail, the entire plane completely dead. Not even its power systems were active, the enchantments lifeless. I was sitting in an ejection seat, so I wasn't completely concerned for my life. Still, I didn't intend to just drop this bird. Come on, sweetheart, give me some juice. I flicked the power a few times, getting nothing out of it, before taking out my sear knife and driving it into the console. I poured power into it, jump-starting the enchantments forcefully and finding the white crystal in charge of power nearly dead. There was a spare, also dead, that I activated alongside the main. The two were regenerating slowly, but this plane was designed to use less power than was regenerated for the sake of indefinite flight, so it would be enough. The systems rebooted, flashing to life and allowing me to rip out my knife. Then I cycled the engine and kick-started the elemental crystals while communication systems came back online. I heard control chattering frantically, noticing my reconnection. John. I heard Amara's voice, but didn't yet respond. I had bigger issues. The engine flashed, fire escaping the nozzle and giving me thrust. I pushed it to max speed before pulling up. My helmet's augmented vision gave me a view of the intimately close landscape approaching. It had taken 15,000 feet to get the engine burning. The G-forces pressing down on my body rapidly increased as I made the sharp turn upward. Pressure and drag caused clouds to appear around the body of the plane, my eyes tracking my G-force counter and seeing it rise past 10. It got more difficult to breathe, but with my temperings, I was more than strong enough to resist it with my bare body. My suit also compressed with the intensity, squeezing my legs and abdomen, assisting my muscles in keeping blood in the brain. My nose gradually turned upward, my altitude only refusing to fall further at 1,400 feet and 13 gs. I started regaining altitude, the gs falling sharply as I leveled out and settled. I took a second to breathe, hearing Amara call one more time. "John, I'm all right." I heard her sigh in relief, my adrenaline still wearing off. I did one last round of checks. "You scared the shit out of me, John. What the hell happened?" "I'm not entirely sure myself. Power levels are unstable, but holding. Engine is nominal. Adjusting heading and returning to base." "Roger, Falcon." I heard Faruga's voice, maintaining full burn as I checked the map and made my turns to set course for Wonderland. I maintained a 3,000-foot altitude, breaking back into Mach 5 relatively easily. Before long, I was flying past Wonderland, arcing around after buzzing the control tower and hitting the air brakes. Not long after, I was making my approach for landing. The landing gear thankfully deployed, making the process smooth. I killed the engine and pulled into the hangar where everyone was waiting. I stopped, cut power, popped the canopy, and climbed out. My body felt oddly weak, my head still throbbing a bit. It wasn't a massive headache, but after finally getting out of that metal coffin, I noticed my eyes burning too. I took off my helmet, Amara running over to me and breaking her momentum with a hug. I chuckled and returned the squeeze. "Sorry about that. You're grounded for a month." "Oh, no more piloting. Well, there goes my plans." I glanced to the side, seeing Polly and Jasmine approach with Faruga. After giving Amara a few more seconds, we separated. I motioned to the plane. "It's too good. Bring it down to 1,500 miles per hour cruising, 2,500 maximum. Keep improving its efficiency and pack in more instruments and comfort. I'll be sending requirements later." "Of course, sir." "Well, you have the data now, so my job is done. I'll send a personal report tomorrow. Also, when the plane is done being studied, scrap it completely. Nobody else is allowed to fly it." "Understood." He looked at me curiously, wisely not questioning my order. I'd be personally ensuring that my directions were followed, and he knew better than to try and pull something within Wonderland. After settling those affairs, I left the hangar and Wonderland with Amara, Polly, and Jasmine. It had only been around 90 minutes since we first arrived. This little stunt hadn't taken long. We went back to the estate where Polly and Jasmine bid me goodbye to go back to their own homes. I would brief Polly later. For now, my attention would be with Amara. We settled into our room, and I immediately brought myself to my workshop. I hadn't taken off my suit nor sent my helmet away, and after arriving, I started offloading the data collected from the flight by the suit. I had captured everything. Every second of change in the avionics, every measurement taken of the plane, every second of footage from its cameras across all spectrums, including communications and my own biometrics. Nothing was left out, and I compiled it all. I wanted to know what happened, because I currently didn't. Amara arrived right as I got it all onto my personal system. Keeping the suit equipped just in case, I started browsing through, going straight for the video footage. I hit play and sat on a chair, Amara joining me. The two of us watching my first-person view on a projected screen. The initial bulk wasn't long. It only took a handful of minutes for me to breach the Kármán line, touching the edge of space. While there was no definite edge between the atmosphere and space, a general marker was the altitude at which air density became a non-factor. It was where aerodynamics lost all meaning, making way for astronautics or orbital mechanics. "Had you intended to test those limits from the start?" Amara asked, the video pausing as my gaze turned to her. "Yes, I had. It's why I ordered them to equip the plane with attitude rockets. If those weren't there, I wouldn't have been able to control the plane beyond about 300,000 feet. Is there a reason you had to do it now, when this technology is still in its infancy?" I could tell she was a bit angry. It was of natural course since I had almost killed myself, but I didn't plan to take the blame. Under normal circumstances, this fiasco wouldn't have happened. It's not like I planned to pass out. I'm still not sure what hit me. Either way, yes, I did have to do this now, and I told you why. The firmament. You wanted to see if it was there? Based on that scripture you read, the firmament is effectively heaven. Why did you think you could reach it? Or, more importantly, why did you think you should even try? I sighed, leaning back and massaging my head. I don't know. I just wanted to. Maybe it's the part of me that still wants to find a way to return home. Or it was the part of me that's still trying to find the dividing line between reality on this planet and reality on Earth. Extremely few people on Earth, at least during my time, had ever been beyond 100,000 feet. There were always all kinds of theories and conspiracies, superstitions and legends about what was actually up there. In the back of my mind, maybe I wanted to be one of those who got a glimpse of the truth, regardless of what it was. Well, did you? I answered her with a motion toward the screen. I'm trying to find out. Fine. She sighed and went quiet, the video resuming. The altitude and speed metrics were overlaid, showing my rise past 200,000 feet and beyond 300,000. Approaching 400,000 it showed when I leveled out before soon beginning my ascent once more. My attention focused and I subconsciously leaned forward. I could hear my audio feed. I clearly remembered speaking the scripture. And then, when my last words left my mouth, it appeared. That familiar hue of gold, the one I could see even now, forever present over the horizon. The Great Barrier. Amara muttered. The two of us watching as I slammed straight into that golden wall. That's when the plane gave out. The engine went cold, the console blinked to darkness, and nothing but momentum carried me further. My visual feed was completely covered by that golden hue, but I didn't seem to hit anything physical. My suit continued to monitor my rise in altitude. I rapidly slowed, but was still carried further another few 100,000 feet. I was clearly passed out as soon as I hit the barrier, my biometrics slumping like I was asleep, totally relaxed. Then, the plane approached its apogee. When gravity had finally slowed it enough to turn it down, in that short few moments when I became weightless, something reached out in front of the plane's nose. Like lightning, a blinding white being struck through the golden space. It stopped before the plane, and from that mass of light reached an arm. The hand pointed a finger, and the tip of the plane's nose touched that finger before turning downward. The light and arm turned out of view, my visual feed showing the planet below. With the extended field of view, the entire planet could be seen, its wondrous curves and endless mass gracing my eyes. From then on it was a simple freefall. The plane oriented itself perfectly, cutting through the atmosphere on re-entry. It handled exceptionally well, too well if I was being honest. After that, I woke up near death and managed to save the plane. I paused the video, pondering silently about what I had seen. Seems like there was more to this planet's surrounding space than I thought. I certainly didn't enter heaven, and I could still see the Great Barrier on the horizon, so I hadn't broken through that either. But perhaps there really was a firmament around the planet. Just because it had a golden hue didn't mean that it was the Great Barrier. It could be some other natural phenomenon. I could imagine that, with the effects that Magica had on the planet itself, there was a possibility that it affected space as well. Perhaps Magica formed its own sort of magnetosphere or ozone layer around the planet, and what I hit was such a protective barrier. It wouldn't be tangible, but slamming into such thick magic would no doubt cause what it did. It was no wonder all the enchantments stopped working. I went back and replied the portion when I slammed into the barrier. Getting another look at the color, I found that although it was relatively golden, the hue was more white than the Great Barrier on the horizon, which was a rich gold. It was brighter, purer, a subtle difference, but a difference nonetheless. Who knows what the golden color came from? Either way, chances were this was a standard magical phenomenon that meant it could be studied and eventually conquered. I wrote some quick notes, including some ideas about its nature that I thought about on a whim. I doubted it was a bow shock of any kind since that would be located much farther out from the planet, but I still put down every idea I had. Well, there we have it. I sighed and brushed away the screens in front of me. The video in front of us was paused on the image of that arm, placing its finger on the tip of the plane. My immediate guess was that it was an angel. I couldn't know, of course, but it wouldn't be the first time one had interacted with me. I pat Amara's hip, her eyes glued to the screen. You can keep watching if you want, but I'm going to bed. My head still hurts. Oh, sure. I'll go with you. She stood, a wave of my hand shutting down my workstation. I finally sent my flight suit back, deciding I didn't care to be so paranoid about making sure every detail had been properly offloaded. The two of us went to bed, mixed thoughts in our minds. I didn't intend to pursue this matter further, at least not until I was in the position to do so. These issues would have to wait for me to become stronger and for Wonderland to develop aviation technology further. For now, there were more pressing matters. This news displeases me. A large man muttered before taking a sip from the golden chalice in his hand. His body was composed of thick layers of muscle, his height well over 9 feet. For horns wrapped around his head like a crown, his eyes a bright yellow. He raised his other hand, a slender thigh raised to his mouth. He bit down on it, ripping muscle and skin clean off the bone. The source of that thigh lay on the royal table he sat behind, a young woman with wide, listless eyes and tear streaks across her face mixed with blood. Her blood filled the large tray she was lying on, neither of her legs remaining. Tog Notsun noticed a hitch in her breath as the large man polished off the meat from her femur, cracking the bone and licking out the marrow. Once it was dry, he threw it to the side with a contented smile on his face. He took another sip from the chalice, a single drop escaping down the corner of his mouth, bright red blood shimmering with dense vigor. Such a potent infusion could only come from a knight who had been tortured and driven to the deepest pit of despair and trauma, causing their body to dump all of its adrenaline into its system. Backed by every ounce of latent vigor, the blood was made into a potion far more nourishing than any other. Tog's mouth watered at the sight of it. He had drunk of that elixir before. There was no greater delicacy, not to mention its ability to increase power and prolong one's lifespan. How many troops have we given you thus far? Well over 5,000, sir. And you failed to kill even a single one of those soldiers. I believe every target under your protection has died as well. Yes. And you've yet to collect any damning evidence? The large man eyed Tog, who nodded. I'm beginning to believe you aren't fit for your position. You've been running the third claw for 4 decades, and this is what has become of it. I know who it is. Is that so? John Cooper. The large man sighed, downing the last of his blood before placing the chalice on the table with a slam. Taking that as the cue, a butler moved over to the young woman, who started whimpering as he retrieved a jagged blade. Tog remained standing where he was as cries and screams of agony echoed through the dark dining hall. Soon, the butler carried an upper arm to the large man, exchanging golden plates. The young woman's whimpers soon ceased, Tog noticing her mind going dark. She had finally died. The large man took a bite and pointed at Tog with the arm. This is the dozenth time you've mentioned him. I believe we told you that we have other plans for him. They won't be enough. His Iron Legion is too powerful, and he's only pressing harder. He will ruin our plans if we don't deal with him. Fine, let's say all of these attacks have been conducted by him and not the church. All they've done is hasten our invasion. Nephilim are saturating the cities and multiplying. We will soon have an entire 10% of the kingdom's population corrupted into Nephilim, and from then on the population will only explode. If he's truly the one behind all of our trouble, then his apparent stupidity is only helping. There's no reason to stop him, not even to save those low nobles. There is. I can tell you why. I've seen through him. Then you better keep it concise, or you're going to replace that woman right there for my next meal. Tog felt like his brain tingled, glancing at the dead woman soaking in her own blood. He looked back at the large man before finally spitting out his words. My guess is that he wants to accelerate our growth. He's striking fear into our Nephilim villages and towns, forcing them to migrate to the cities so they can begin corrupting more, as you've said. The issue is that it's happening too fast. The faster the better. I expected you of all people to be smart enough to see such simple logic. It's a matter of normalization, sir. Tog refuted, continuing before he could be rebutted. The humans are growing restless. It takes time for them to accept the Nephilim, to be desensitized to them. If they grow too fast, if they're corrupted too fast, then they'll start resisting instead. Hardly an issue. Why should we possibly give a damn about resistance? Because it'll prevent us from corrupting the latter half of the human population. They'll start panicking and then start fighting. Especially the Magi. Having fought the Scourge for so long, they'll see the Nephilim as a disease instead of a higher level of evolution. We won't be able to mask the rapid increase in hostility. It'll be easy for the humans to justify fighting against us. And once again, I hardly see an issue. That's what war is for. By the time the humans start to resist, we'll have more than enough numbers and strength to wipe them out. Will we? Tog grit his teeth, Images of Iron Legion's battles during their joint missions with Stronghold echo replaying in his mind. He had seen the sheer devastation they could muster. Assuming that was a mere fraction of Iron Legion's power, assuming that John Cooper was hiding far more than he allowed them to show during those missions, he really wouldn't bet on them being strong enough. Sir, it's a race between our corruption and the Nephilim's acceptance. If we end up causing a civil war, we may not be able to escape eradication. We haven't spread enough to do as we please, and it will remain that way for some time. What John Cooper wants is precisely that civil war, because then he'll have the support of a large portion of humanity. If he gets that, we may not be able to usurp the kingdom. The kingdom has already fallen into our hands, civil war or not. And I maintain that a war is only beneficial. I fail to see how they could possibly resist us. Even with John Cooper's new technology, including the stuff we have no idea about, he had an entire research facility near the Wedded City. It isn't possible that he hasn't built weapons even greater than what we've seen or even heard about. Yes, Tog. Even with those plentiful toys, he will fall like all others. Not to mention that this is all conjecture on your part. He may be a summoner, but even summoners can be idiots like normal people. They just have stupid thoughts faster. And while John Cooper is no doubt above the average considering his inventions, I heavily doubt that he's willing to indirectly cause the death of many millions, not to mention start a civil war and kill millions more. And to what? Keep us from controlling the kingdom? You think his allegiances lie so deeply? Quite the contrary. He hates the nobility, and I don't believe he could plan so far ahead. He doesn't have the power to control the future. I don't. Tog opened his mouth but couldn't refute. Not because he agreed, but because he so fundamentally disagreed that he couldn't formulate the words to rebut. It was a misunderstanding about who John was. After they had kidnapped John and given him their warning, Tog had never seen him again. At some point, it became impossible to even pinpoint the region he was in, let alone guess what he was doing. He disappeared, never giving them even the slightest chance of getting their hands on him again. Even a sovereign was useless. After all, a sovereign had to know where their enemy was to kill them. Tog knew he was currently facing a war of information, an invisible war fought with the details, or the lack thereof. He also knew he was losing miserably. The six-figure death count of Nephilim was proof of that, even if they were mostly low-authority fodder. It was also proof that John possessed a level of cunning nobody had ever fathomed before. Nobody would guess that the reckless musclehead disguised as a summoner could be so subtle and conniving. Tog was on the verge of believing that everything John had done before Iron Legion, every one of his stunts, all of his mannerisms, every little action in and out of the Magisterium, and every smile he ever displayed in front of those who glanced toward Son Industries, was all an act for precisely this purpose, to deceive them into believing he was a small player, an act to make them think that despite his ability to invent, he had no ability to politic or scheme. John was the most powerful summoner to ever walk the planet. Nobody in known history could wield Psycha as well as him. He was a genius the likes of which would only be seen once in a millennium. He was the kind of person nobody doubted would break the Great Barrier and become a sovereign. Even his aura had developed a unique technique of illusions and mental manipulation based on his sparse battle records from Stronghold Charlie and the Treehouse. And yet, despite everything about him, his enemies were still doubting his ability. Tog stared at the large man across the table, a sovereign knight, known as Pharaoh Runias, one of the pillars of the kingdom and the true leader of the Scourge's corruptive force behind human lines. He wasn't stupid. He wasn't supposed to be. Despite being a muscle-headed knight, he was diligent in his work and had remained undetected for decades. His influence spread far and wide, and he was the only person Tog Natsan answered to. Now, all Tog could see was a fool. The complete and utter pride in his strength and that of his plans would normally be acceptable. Encouraged, even. They had all worked before. Now it blinded him to the truth before him. It was so unobvious as to make itself glaring. A genius in plain sight, so unnaturally intelligent that they could convince others they shouldn't be treated as one. Tog wanted to doubt that John should truly be treated with such a high threat level. And yet that thought only fueled the idea that they needed to do precisely that. Tog changed his tone, wiping away any hints of desperation or obsession. Sir, I'm simply advising a little caution. Iron Legion is one of our more significant threats, and I'd like to place more resistance on them to stop their plans. We do that, and the kingdom is ours without contest. So, you want more troops than we've already given you? No, sir. I want a brood father. Pharaoh's eyes widened, his chalice lowering to the table. For memory extraction? Yes. Those troops can't be captured, only killed. I want a death shrine so I can take their memories from their corpses. Give me that, and I'll give you the evidence you want and guarantee that Iron Legion won't be able to mess with our plans. They will be a non-factor, something you'll no longer have to bother with. Pharaoh stared at Tog silently, sitting there for several seconds before eventually waving. Very well. I'll send word back. They will have to come from the crossing, though, so give it some time. Thank you, sir. No need. After all, if you fail, you'll be the one pinned to the shrine. Staking your life on this will certainly help my plans along. Why, yes, sir. Tog went quiet, bowing and leaving the room with a faint tremble. He knew what he had to do. He knew he could do it. So long as he could prove that John Cooper was a threat, his mission could be considered a success. From then on, it would be out of his hands, his words moving the big players who could do something about the chess pieces. Not that it made the stakes any less agonizing to think about. He had to succeed, or suffer unfathomable pain and terror for the rest of his life.